On this episode, we talk about the CM Punk and Vince McMahon podcasts, Erick Rowans' push, a new TLC match, and YouTube comments now on Byte That. Welcome everybody to episode 67 of Byte That, the somewhat maybe international professional wrestling podcast where we talk about the ups and downs of that which we love, which is controversy and lots of it because, wow, the past week has been just out of this world. This podcast is going to be dedicated very much to the whole situation regarding CM Punk, his appearance on the Art of Wrestling podcast, as well as the fact that Vince McMahon himself was on a live podcast in the WWE Network, uncensored interview by Stone Cold Steve Austin. Remember, the Byte That podcast is available every single Tuesday night on YouTube, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, and ByteThat.com. And if you want to interact with us, you can do so by searching Byte That Cast. My name is Juan Velas. I am from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And joining me as always is the dynamic duo, first all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, the sex stallion himself, Mr. Ryan McNulty.
Juan, I'm pretty pumped for this show. This has to be the greatest week in wrestling podcast history. So we got to continue that trend. We got to continue this awesome podcast momentum and have a great show today.
And speaking of podcast momentum, all the way from the Double F in Manitoba for just a little while longer, Mr. Keith Poshik.
Indeed, and I will not say how much that excites me. But Juan, this week is so big that I skipped the coffee and I'm drinking chai tea because I'm such a man.
Man. And yeah, this has been a legendary, not just week, this has been a crazy year for WWE. Everything from, the Ultimate Warrior situation to Sting, Brock Lesnar, and then we got these two situations that have been going on with Vince McMahon, CM Punk, the whole podcast situation. But before we get to that, I do want to bring up at least two things from Raw. Number one is the whole situation with Erick Rowan. So Erick Rowan, we've apologized to him in the podcast because I think a majority of the people expected him to get the boot after the Wyatt family split. But now we see that they're really going with this whole process. They're now calling him Big Red. Big Red?
I hate that nickname.
Am I feeling this?
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's one of the situations where you got the big guy, you got Big Red, and Big Red. That's so easy. Could they have thought of anything else?
It's not only is it a terrible nickname, it's also my least favorite chewing gum, so it's just bad all around. One positive, though, about Erick Rowan is they do seem to be giving him even more character development.
Yeah, and his nickname, it's shared with a giant dog named Clifford. Think about it.
Well, so you're related to gum and a dog.
Yes.
No, but realistically, they're really trying to develop his character. They seem to be sort of poking reference at the fact that maybe he's like this genius type guy that people thought maybe wasn't too bright because of the whole mask thing. It just seems like something like that's happening.
Yeah, on Raw, I think they said he was an award-winning winemaker. He had a really high IQ, and he was a classically trained guitar expert. Like, wow, way to take the whole character development thing you were doing with crazy old Hickman and turn it right upside down. Not in a million years would I assume that that's where they were going with Erick Rowan. Not only that, they finished the show with Erick Rowan. He was the main centerpiece at the end of the show. Crazy.
Who would have thought,
exactly.
Really?
I gotta say, I'm kind of digging it because they're trying to go with this whole opposite of the image you'd expect with Rowan, because you pictured him as just like this kind of simpleton guy who would just beat people up and be really stupid. So they're trying to go with this whole eccentric kind of genius gimmick. And then it kind of works. He's got some exaggerated kind of power moves, and he's been pretty fun to watch. So, I'm digging it, and I like how they've kind of kept this whole Team Cena thing still somewhat together after the fallout of Survivor Series. So, I think it's a good place for Rowan right now, and I'm really digging it.
And I forgot the most important part. He solved a Rubik's Cube during a promo.
That's how you know you're going over the company.
Exactly.
And just a quick note, with Ryan, you just brought up, I'm really happy that they really kept that group together, because it seems to be just more of guys with a common goal, because they don't have the WWE champion right now. Maybe that's sort of their way of keeping that situation active. And maybe sort of their solution to this whole absence of Brock at Raw, which, you know, they actually got Paul Heyman to sort of a, you know, really good promo. Check it out. It's up on WWE's Fan Nation channel. But we got Seth Rollins taking on John Cena in a tables match at TLC, because we're getting a chairs match. We're getting all these matches, which a chairs match hits me on the head a little bit, but then we got this tables match.
That's not allowed anymore.
True, that right. It hits me right in the back, man. But we got a tables match here. I want to get sort of your feedback on your expectations here. The whole sort of reference to the fact that maybe we could be seeing a new number one contender after this match. What's your take on this match?
I'm not too sure that this stipulation actually adds to the match, because it's kind of that thing where if something negative for Cena's on the line, you feel like it's almost a shoo-in that he's going to win the match. But maybe they do want to go a different direction. They don't want to do this Brock Cena 3, so this might actually be a way to take it away. So maybe, I don't know, I got mixed feelings on it. I am excited, though, to see Rollins Cena in a singles match on pay-per-view. Tables match, sometimes the endings are hit or miss. But with Rollins involved, I'm pretty confident that no matter what that table spot's going to be, it's going to be insane.
Mm-hmm. If you go back and look at it, John Cena doesn't really have a very good record in gimmick matches against people that are lower than him on the card. Like, he lost to Sheamus. That was Sheamus's first title, beating John Cena in a tables match. It's more of a way, I think, for John Cena to be able to lose that match and not look weak. Maybe they're realizing, like, hey, maybe they don't want to see Brock Lesnar versus John Cena for the third time. This is a way to kind of take back that number one contendership.
And at the same time, with that process, they can frustrate John Cena, because it's like that Sheamus thing. The way Sheamus won, it pissed everybody off because it was so simple.
It was dumb.
I mean, yeah. Seth Rollins can technically push Cena and break a table, and he'll win the match. So it's a situation of, it doesn't matter who gets pinned. He can get attitude adjustmented, I guess you could say, like 20 times, and if it's not through table, the match doesn't end. So I think that's probably the best case scenario that they can have for this pay-per-view until we eventually get Brock Lesnar, which, you know, we got to get to that topic in the whole Vince McMahon portion of the show.
One last kind of note on that, though, is this should be a win for Seth Rollins, and I'm sure we'll go into it, later, but if you're looking at it right now, Brock doesn't even really count as the top heel. Like, Rollins right now is the top heel.
Totally.
Who would have thought?
He should be getting the win here. Like Keith said, this is kind of an opportunity for Cena to not look weak and have Rollins go over. And it's like he really has to, because aside from Brock, he kind of has to go into WrestleMania as the top heel.
Yeah, we still got 2 weeks headed before TLC, so there's certainly a lot of time for the build-up. In next week's podcast, we'll talk about way more about these situations. Paul Heyman had a great promo on Raw. Obviously, I think that next week's Raw is going to be a little bit more shocking, a little bit more unorthodox, simply because this week in wrestling was so packed. I think they limited this Raw a little bit because of the things we're going to be talking about. So, guys, this is where anything can happen right now.
We turn it up a notch, as they say.
Yeah, bam, we got this thing going on because... So I was just sitting in the backyard of my fiance's house playing with 3 dogs, and all of a sudden I get a tweet saying, CM Punk is on the Art of Wrestling. And then I send Keith a group me message. He starts freaking out because he's got the Star Wars trailer going on. And then he finds out this is going on. The internet breaks. There's almost no way to listen to this apparent interview with CM Punk and the Art of Wrestling. Fast forward to after listening, I should say, to this podcast. We haven't really had a lot of time to really talk about it because we wanted to save this conversation for the podcast. And that was before we even got the Vince McMahon thing. So how crazy is that? I got to know first, Keith, what was your reaction when I sent you that message? And then your progressive reaction as you listened to that podcast?
It started out like about as excited as I could be. Like you said, the timing was just impeccable for me as a human being. But as you listen more and more, you just realize like, hey, these were things that needed to be said. Not all of them, because I do have my bones to pick. But a lot of that stuff needed to be said, and a lot of that needed clarification. And I'm happy it's out there.
What about you, Ron?
Well, initially, I think I saw the night before something on some wrestling website or Twitter or whatever that said that CM Punk was going to be on The Art of Wrestling. And then Colt Cabana actually came out and denied it or something like that. And then sure enough, the next day, I get your message and I'm scrambling to download it. I think just to listen to it on the ride to my Thanksgiving, whatever gathering, I had to rip it from YouTube, just to hear it. So it was quite a challenge because it broke the internet. But like, I honestly thought this was a moment that was never going to happen. I didn't think Punk was ever going to speak out. I figured he would have kept that to himself. Paul Heyman many times stressed that, we may never find out what happened in that room with Vince McMahon, Triple H, and Punk. So to hear that he was going to be on The Art of Wrestling and actually speak out, I was excited and just in disbelief and very satisfied that it actually happened.
And it's one of those situations where we sort of discarded it because of everything Paul Heyman said. Everybody said, we all assumed that if CM Punk was ever going to be in a podcast, he would make zero references to the past. He would talk about comics or whatever the case. It got to the point where, okay, not only was the Art of Wrestling's podcast site down, the Art of Wrestling, okay, a wrestling podcast became the number 2 podcast in all of iTunes.
Didn't iTunes take a hit too?
All of iTunes. Everybody, think about that. A wrestling podcast. That's how hot this was. The fact that, we talk about podcast as a medium, as something that's still going up, even though it's very much active. Here we go. Just a couple of hours after this interview was posted, number 2 on iTunes. It is absolutely crazy. So we got a lot of your interactions. We're going to be getting to those comments progressively through this conversation. But we want to get to a couple of specific things because obviously it was a 2-hour interview. There is a part 2. So that if you haven't listened to his interview, make sure you look up Art of Wrestling. You check that out because there's a Q&A type portion this week. So who knows what else is going to come out. But the first thing that we got to get to is the whole situation regarding CM Punk's health. Because we even saw and even commented in the podcast, so it's documented, that during his last couple of months, he seemed notably worn out. There were a lot more bags under his eyes. He just looked a little bit more out of shape. There was something going on. So getting this information in the podcast was not so much a breath of fresh air as much as confirmation something was going on. So Ryan, taking it to you first, how did you react when you really heard about Punk talking about this and just sort of how he said it?
It made a lot of sense, like you said. And, I remember when he first left, we were talking on the show that he definitely hadn't been, it seems like he had lost the passion, just wasn't wrestling like himself. And it was really shocking. We're just kind of going on this assuming that Punk's being honest here, but just a lot of the negligence that it seemed like WWE takes with some things with health. And a lot of that is also Punk himself agreeing to continue to work under these conditions. But it's pretty crazy to all throughout talk about, what different injuries he was working through in different times of the year, whether it was that elbow injury or what we found out to be a staph infection. It's just crazy all that he worked through and the amount of antibiotics he was on and still carrying on.
I think that's the real story of this whole thing. If there's one takeaway, it's that, and just how crazy, how many things we don't know about professional wrestling on what goes on behind the scenes of the environment that these guys are expected to work under. And it's very disappointing that that's not getting more media traction, because that's a very unfortunate thing.
It's crazy how how painful the world of professional wrestling is. I even help run some wrestling shows down here, and sometimes a match will end and I'm recording, and then they're still hurting like 2 weeks after. Guess what? CM Punk, WWE champion at the time, he's got to wake up the next day and wrestle the next day and the next day and then get on a plane and do all that stuff. So hearing about the whole health situation was bittersweet. And I think both of you can attest to this. Even Cole Cabana sort of made reference a couple of times that he saw the writing on the wall. He knew that CM Punk was going through this situation, and some of the decisions that Punk was doing was effectively going to make him worse, and it did. Which sort of brings up a controversial question, we may not even get to, which is how much of that did CM Punk bring to himself? We don't know. We are not here to talk about that. What we are here to talk about is the fact that we are getting this exposure to things that we would otherwise never hear. As Keith mentioned, the whole health situation. How crazy is that? Any last thoughts you really have about this situation regarding the health? Because obviously that's the big thing. There was the whole situation with the doctor, and now we got Bob Holly coming out. All these guys saying, hey, yeah, something like that happened to me a couple of years ago. Does that surprise you?
Well, I think we had all seen how we thought WWE had been pretty proactive with the concussions and things like that. We've seen a lot of people sit out of matches and, take a couple weeks off because of concussions. So we assumed that, they were doing that for everyone, and that there weren't, we didn't think anybody was working through these concussions because we'd seen such extreme situations with, Dolph Ziggler or Daniel Bryan sitting out because of them. So that I think that's why it came as a shock, and especially just Dr. Aman or Amen, I don't know how it's pronounced, but
the doctor.
It seemed like yes, it seemed through Punk's stories that he was extremely negligent, and it'd be very curious to see if anything comes out of this, legally or whatever.
I think the key word in what you just said was the extreme cases. We see those, but it's really easy to forget, like, hey, dude takes a suplex wrong, that can result in a concussion. We never really know how many of those happen during a show, so we probably don't see all of it. And I think this whole situation made us as a wrestling community more aware to that kind of stuff. Just exactly what we're asking of these people on a weekly basis.
Exactly. I mean, Punk even brought this up when he was still with the company, that when he hurt his knee and then like 2 or 3 weeks later worked a TLC match. And even at the time he was saying how Vince basically called him up saying like, hey, we scheduled for your TLC match on Raw. And it's like, clearly that's a little shady. I don't care who you are after a knee surgery. I don't think anyone's ready to get into the ring in a TLC match, no less, that soon.
And obviously, I do need to point out, we are going to try and play devil's advocate as much as we can, because not only were we not there, we are simply wrestling fans watching the product. However, with those things, those happened. Like the whole situation, he brings up Ryback, referring to him as steroid guy. He does basically a slam through a table, but he sort of botched it. He sort of missed the spot, and then you see Punk hits sort of the concrete. That there is visual evidence. So it's situations where we can actually get concrete information that's maybe not 100% correct, because we don't know how these conversations happen backstage, but it makes you think. If a guy has knee surgery, I'd be freaking out. I'm thinking in my life, like, okay, so I can't walk maybe, so rehab for like 6-7 months. But here are guys that they are human, as much as WWE tries to build them as otherwise, and they're wrestling like these outrageous matches. So it's sort of a situation that's so bittersweet, because he even brings up the whole situation, sort of poking fun at the wellness policy. So many things that, as fans, you both brought it up. We got to care about these guys because we want to keep watching them wrestle. Look at Dana Bryan's situation. It makes you wonder about so many things that we're not knowing, or that maybe they could have been handled better. But because, as Vince McMahon mentioned, that we'll bring up later, the roster is not necessarily there, there's this desperation factor to sort of, you got D-Bry, you got Punk, you got Cena. Those guys, they got to be on the show no matter what. And related to that, at one point, CM Punk brought something that was very controversial. Even he pointed it out. The fact that he was the person behind the creation, behind the idea known as the Shield. Just to summarize, basically, the Shield was going to be sort of behind him, much like the Straight Edge Society. So it was going to be these guys he was going to be working with after WrestleMania. Obviously, that was not the case. The Shield ended up doing their own thing. He was really happy for them. But the fact that he brought that up, I thought was just interesting, and I wanted to get your reactions on one, if you thought that was true or not, and just overall, how did you feel? How did you feel knowing what you now know?
This was kind of just a more lighthearted, just kind of cool behind the scenes thing.
Yeah.
But it was also kind of brought up in the same light as Punk kind of having these ideas and then they kind of get taken away from him. But it was cool to hear that, Cassius Ohno was actually, or Chris Hero was originally supposed to be a part of the Shield. And funny enough, I was actually listening to Talk is Jericho on my drive home from work today, and they had Seth Rollins on, and he also said, at the start of the Shield, we were originally supposed to be security forces for Punk. So there's, confirmation from another source that they were supposed to be linked. And obviously you could see shades of that at the beginning of their run.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That did happen at the beginning of their run, not directly, because it was kind of, are they working for Punk? And yeah, they were with Paul Heyman. But it's just one of those cool little things. Like when he said it, it's like, of course you were behind the Shield. You know what's good. So yeah, of course you'd make this great thing.
No, and obviously you can make up all these hypothetical scenarios. What if they had done that? What if then, hypothetically, the Authority would have been this thing, and then Punk had the Shield, so instead of the Shield being the Authority's enforcers, so many, possibilities there. And then, obviously, he talked about all those things about how 12 Rounds 2 was originally going to be him. It ended up being Randy. He also spoke about this WrestleMania situation where he was not getting paid nearly as much, even though he was arguably, one of the top draws or one of the top performers in that night. He talked about, this to me was absolutely fascinating. I as a fan, dream of just hearing things about like this. The conversation he had with Vince and Triple H the day he walked out. The infamous conversation that day on Twitter, I remember, like every wrestling news website, every single person was covering the fact that, yes, these three guys are in a room right now covering what is possibly the last day of CM Punk's career in the WWE. And now we actually got to know sort of what happened. I mean, only from one source, because Vince didn't really budge. In his interview with Stone Cold, he didn't want to sort of air the dirty laundry in there. But how awesome was that? Just sort of to getting to know that, and at the same time, him bringing up sort of that he was not paid as much as Triple H and all that stuff. So it's just sort of cool tidbits that when you watch wrestling for so long, you start wondering, how does that work behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's just to know those details was amazing, and I think learning a lot from what he said in that room. It's like, even though it seems like he hates wrestling and especially now, it seems like, Punk wants nothing to do with it. You can just tell from the interview that there's part of him that still cares. The fact that he was vouching for Daniel Bryan even up until the day he quit, saying he should be in the main event of WrestleMania, which also confirms that it wasn't their plan all along. And I think we've heard little tidbits of that along the way.
How crazy is that? That the original plan was legitimately Batista and Randy Orton.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, no. Punk, like he says at the beginning of the interview, by him leaving, he did change things. He indirectly made WrestleMania 30 a great WrestleMania because of it. Otherwise, it looked like it was heading in a very dark direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, we also got a lot of feedback about this on a YouTube video Ryan posted just a couple of days ago. A ton of interaction between not just people in ours, but everybody there. So I want to bring up first a comment from J4 Gaming that Ryan's going to be reading out.
All right, so J4 Gaming says, "It's incredible to me, really. is a lot to take in with all this stuff that happened with CM Punk. I'm not really too sure what to think. All I know is that my perspective on both Phil Brooks and the WWE has changed almost entirely. I'd agree with him there. If everything Philip said was true, then I believe I could truly say that WWE is a heartless business that only cares about their image, focusing on how to make themselves look better, even at the cost of their talent, showcasing what they want instead of what we want. However, the sad part is this isn't really the big news. We have heard other wrestlers talking about their mistreatment over in WWE. I think this one just really opened a lot of fans' eyes. Even though I've got my gripes with WWE, I have a few gripes with Philip as well. I like how he calls him Philip. Anyway, he flat out said that he was working under poor conditions and just accepted it. Even though the blame can't just be put on him, the WWE has messed up. I think it is safe to say that the WWE has put themselves in a really bad position. I wouldn't at all be surprised to see the WWE Network subscriptions drop, as well as regular TV viewers. The possibilities of penalties that WWE may suffer from this are nearly endless. Maybe I'm taking this a bit too far, but I guess we'll just have to see how things transpire over the next month or so.
I just have one question to everybody out there. If you listen to the podcast, did you watch Raw on Monday?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, I did.
Controversy creates cast.
Yeah, to comment on some of these things, I think that this definitely, I agree with him here where he says this definitely has opened a lot of people's eyes to maybe things that go on backstage that most people didn't know about. Like Keith kind of stressed here, I don't think they're going to lose too many viewers. I don't think they're going to lose too many subscriptions. And the legal things could happen. This might pave the way for people to kind of bring it together. But this podcast alone will not get WWE, in the courtrooms for like bad business practices, because there needs to be more of a push for it, I think.
Exactly.
And it could happen. This could be the catalyst for that. But this alone, I don't think will cause that.
If there's one thing that I'd like to see happen as far as repercussions go, like you said, it's for this to start paving the way towards like better work environments for the talent.
Yeah, because I think the situation to really take away from not just this interview, but from the Vince one, is that some people bring up, you know what, who cares? We consume the product we watch every week. I've seen that. The fact of the matter is, we got to care about these people, because when Tom Cruise or somebody, does a certain stunt, he has a stunt double. It's carefully planned out. These are guys that can die
when the Miz does
in the middle of that ring. Exactly. I mean, if something happens, it'll happen to Mizdow too. We get double loss, man. But we've legitimately lost people in here. So for me, I do see wrestling as a whole in a different light, but more WWE, because WWE has such a pressure that for whatever they call themselves, sports entertainment, they are still a wrestling company. Is there a ring in the middle of an arena? Yes. Guess what? You do wrestling. So that to me, I think is a really good point. So then we got a comment from Thomas Ramirez. Keith, take that one away.
Indeed. Mr. Ramirez says, I think that if you play with fire, it will burn you. The WWE abused Punk, who is more loved and selling more merchandise than Cena, and now they're paying the consequences. Enjoy the CM Punk chants during every Divas match, a-holes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had they eventually had to release him or let his contract go. I mean, when you walk out on the company, you can't really blame them for firing him. Yes, they made it personal with which we didn't mention, that he was given his severance papers on his wedding day. So that was a step over the line, I agree. But I don't disagree with them firing him. Obviously, when you listen to the podcast, it seems like there was a lack of communication after Punk had walked out. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, you can't really blame WWE. And also the CM Punk chants, you can't stop them.
The one thing that he touched on that we didn't touch on earlier that's fascinating was the whole merchandise thing. How CM Punk was outselling John Cena in merchandise, and then he turned heel, and then all of a sudden the merchandise starts to drop. That's a fascinating part of the business that I never really thought of before, because all of us as a community were like, yeah, CM Punk heel, that's awesome. But he actually takes a cut in wages doing that.
No, that is an interesting element with the whole cut and pay, but I think the way he worded things, it's almost like he kind of linked A and B together. I'm pretty sure there was just a brief time where Punk was outselling John Cena in T-shirts, and it was obviously during the whole summer of Punk in 2011. So when he actually turned heel, I'm not sure that he was. I can't confirm that, but I know the time he was outselling him was that summer of Punk time. But yes, turning heel, there is drawbacks. It's actually less money because, you know, half the crowd all of a sudden starts not liking you anymore, and you're not getting as many T-shirt sales.
If I was a wrestler, I'd just be crying, like, just going out there, can you please buy my T-shirt? I mean, I'm doing this thing you want. You want me to turn heel, okay? I'm doing it, but just buy the T-shirt. Think about that pressure, man. It's crazy. So then next up, we got Mr. Twitter himself, Mr. YouTuber, I should say, Pirate Hunter 316. Mr. McNulty, take it away.
All right, so great commenter as always, Pirate Hunter 13. He gets into what he likes and dislikes from the podcast. So let's get right into it. He liked that he called out Triple H for being an a-hole. To him, he always thinks Triple H has been a smug jerk. He likes how he called out the fact that D-Bry winning at WrestleMania wasn't always part of the plan like WWE would like us to believe. He also liked that he called out Ryback. Basically, he felt he was very believable when he was talking about the whole Ryback situation, about him, basically being a hazard to work with in the ring. And he liked how they called out WWE for their the independent contractor situation with how medical practices are done and how people are kind of underpaid in, basically Punk alluding to the fact that maybe there needs to be some, not exactly a union, maybe something to protect WWE workers. What he disliked was saying that The Rock and Brock Lesnar are not a draw. It's a little delusional for Punk to say. And he gets that, Punk's great and all, but he thinks he was kind of blowing smoke a little there. He does bring up a great point. I don't think there's any doubt that The Rock has been a draw for WrestleMania. You can go look at the buy rates, and it's very clear that The Rock had some sway with some WrestleMania buy rates. So maybe Punk's exaggerating there, but, I get where he's kind of coming from.
Yes and no, because another part of the podcast that I found interesting was when he was talking about his match with Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, where they were going through the whole thing. Then he finally asked Vince, who's going to win? Well, Brock. But who's going to be here the next day? I can easily see how you could be bitter about something like that. We even talk about it endlessly. So it was probably through those colored glasses that he would say something like that, because that's borderline delusional if it's any other way.
Simon Linder mentioned, well, we all don't really know if Punk really told the truth about the company in this podcast. Maybe Punk made the WWE look bad for no reason at all. Oh, and it's so disrespectful for them to fire him on his wedding day, as we pointed out, when the dude actually walked out on the company 5 months before that. What was the WWE supposed to do? Keep him employed and keep paying him until his contract expired? Other than that, I really enjoyed the podcast, even though I don't believe everything he said. It was a nice way of looking at things going on in Punk's life. The key word there being I don't believe everything he said. I think we should take everything with a grain of salt, regardless if it's Vince, Punk, anybody.
Exactly. Just remember that every story has two sides to it, and one's not the definitive one. Actually, every story has three sides to it. Let me retract that statement.
Interesting, sir. So then we got Stephen Newell. Ryan, you want to take this one away?
Sure. All right, so Steven says, he came off like a disgruntled ex-employee who didn't get his way and is fishing for reasons to discredit his former employer. Regardless of the validity of his comments, that was his demeanor and it didn't help. I have to question the MRSA diagnosis, considering he practices jiu-jitsu. It doesn't take a doctor to figure out that you know it when you get it. I sense some exaggeration in that part. He also stressed how he was an independent contractor, but he didn't say the duration of the contract nor the terms. If he breached his contract, then it's his own fault. Also, I really enjoyed how he just found a royalty check. Yeah, I have paychecks just laying around my couch that I forget as well. People will champion him for appearing on Colt's podcast because it's free, but in the podcast, Phil mentioned looking at his bank account. He clearly doesn't care about money anymore, nor needs to. This is just promotional material for Colt, and I can't hate the hustle, but let's be real. Let's be clear what's going on here regarding the way the WWE operates. Yes, it's a monopoly, and its employees are subject to its terms. There's nowhere else to go, really, and does shady stuff go on? More than likely. The same happens with major sports leagues, NFL, MLB, steroids, legal troubles, cover-ups, and damage control all over the place to control the product to make more money. Was the podcast entertaining? Sure. Do I believe it all? I don't know. My biggest takeaway is that wrestling is a business, and it has to make money, and the only way to make money is, well, taking advantage of someone. It's a really good comment. The royalty check thing, first of all, Punk, he's a guy who's pretty good with his money from what we can understand. I think they even say it in his DVD, or at least allude to it. I think it's very realistic for a guy when he kind of really broke through and is making good money that he could probably have some paychecks lying around. I mean, I think he makes a joke about Harley Race or something. He found like a check under his couch. Or
like $10,000
yeah,
or something like that, yeah.
That's a thing that wrestlers might be doing if all of a sudden they come into a lot of money, maybe more than they even need. I'm willing to believe that. He might have pushed the, reissuing the check more just to kind of, bust WWE a little bit. But I think this some great comments here. I don't know, on the whole MRSA diagnosis for the staph infection, just because Punk does jiu-jitsu and wrestling where staph infections can be common doesn't mean he can self-diagnose,
Exactly. No, and one thing that Steven pointed out is that if you go outside of the WWE, you can go from making whatever, like $100,000, $250,000. I don't know. We don't know how much they actually make, but you can go from that to like $20 to $200 a show, and then your life is just completely different. Okay, so we got a lot more comments, and unfortunately, due to time constraints, we cannot get to. However, thanks to Lunatic Fringe Reviews, Trover Corcoran, Angela Clark for leaving comments. Make sure to check them out also on our YouTube video, which is your thoughts on CM Punk speaking out on the whole WWE situation. So now, having said that, I think it's time for a little break and bring up this week's Tweet of the Week.
Are you ready? Can you feel it?
Yeah,
Are
let's
you
do
jumping
it.
on the edge
man.
of your seat? You know why you're on the edge of your seat? Because it's the perfect place to be for a money shot. It's money shot time, ladies and gentlemen. In these woods, we call that the Tweet of the Week. Now, this week's Tweet of the Week is brought to you by Mr. Marty DeRosa. He's a very good comedian and also does the... He does $5 wrestling with Colt Cabana. Now, Juan will tell you a little bit more about $5 wrestling in a bit, but I digress. This week's Tweet of the Week is... I wonder who will win the Slammy Award for Pipe Bomb of the Year on next week's Raw. Hashtag WWE. Think about it. It's been this week's Tweet of the Week.
Thank you, Keith, for that beautiful Tweet of the Week. Thank you, Marty DeRosa, for bringing up the fact that, yes, the Slammies are going to be interesting there next week on Monday Night Raw.
1 year anniversary of winning a Slammy in wrestling years.
Let's keep going. It was one of out of how many thousand people there, Keith? You're not alone in this.
I am
Stop being so egotistical.
1/10,000th owner, at least, of a Slammy.
I would slap you, but I love you too much, man.
I accept this.
Let's do it. Okay, everybody, so I want to announce that our Byte That Beat Sprite giveaway has ended. Thanks to each and every person that entered. You could have gone over to bytethat.com/giveaway. The contest ended today. The winner will be announced on next week's edition of the podcast. That is December 9th, so stay tuned for that. By the way, this Thursday, Keith brought up $5 Wrestling. I'm going to be reviewing the documentary The Power of the Freight Train. This is a documentary about $5 Wrestling's most famous superstar, the Freight Train. Choo choo! I'm also going to be unboxing it, so you definitely want to check it out. It was Kickstarter funded, so I funded it. I think Keith did too. Pretty good times. Next week, I'm going to be reviewing Lucha Underground. Stay tuned for that. It's a really awesome series. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. Check it out. We're going to be getting ready for some end of year stuff. So stay tuned to some of the top things that happened throughout 2014. And I want to announce that I'm getting married on December 20th. So that's pretty cool. You know, that is awesome. More awesome is the fact that Mr. Ryan McNulty is coming over here, so we're going to be doing a couple of special things.
Let's hope your wife didn't hear that. Your fiance.
Why not?
Because you just said more awesome than your wedding.
well, I got to bring up something for the podcast. I mean, hey, I got to kiss up to you, man. After the podcast, I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, I mentioned the whole... Yeah, Ryan's coming. That's cool. But Ryan's coming to Puerto Rico.
And read between the lines there, people. I'm the a-hole.
Yeah, it's a very
complicated situation.
Yeah, let's just say originally both were coming, but only one. But we got a money shot this week, so there's that.
There will be no money shots in Puerto Rico.
Yes, at the very least, it's not like Keith just blew us off. He was actually trying to come down, but it just didn't happen.
Exactly. Trying to come. Blew you off. Didn't happen.
Exactly, man. We are 5-year-olds.
But okay, hey, so speaking of all those innuendos, it will be episode 69 in video. In video, it's on the YouTube version will be video, so it'll be a special edition of the Byte That podcast.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be an unforgettable experience. Keith, we love you, man.
I understand.
We got the money shot.
I understand.
So now we got the CM Punk situation out of the way, and just when it was still boiling, people are still talking about it, they announced that Vince McMahon is going to be on a video version of the Stone Cold podcast because they can't bring up Steve Austin's show, so they changed the name. So we got that situation. It was an hour and 15-minute long podcast because Vince McMahon had to get those extra minutes because it hosts the network.
I know we're PG or whatever we are, but that was the most baller ass move I've ever seen. It's like, you know what? I own this place. We're going 15 more.
I just looked at that like, yeah, you got money. When you can just be like, 15 more minutes, whatever, let's just do this thing. So there are a ton of things he brought up. We all speculated even last week that, yeah, it was going to be a very streamlined, rehearsed situation. But Stone Cold was very straight up. He would just switch to a next topic, and you would see Vince's face sort of being like, whoa, you know, I did not think you were going to talk about that. So, obviously, we talked about CM Punk. Vince McMahon brought up the whole CM Punk situation. What was your reaction to the fact that he mentioned that CM Punk maybe doesn't have the talking skills, ironically, or interpersonal skills in the business aspect that maybe is what effectively closed the relationship between WWE and CM Punk?
I mean, I think it's very believable that, you know, Punk can just get really frustrated if he doesn't get his way, just kind of blow them off and not really want to kind of compromise. I can see that he could kind of be stubborn in that way. And definitely gathering from, you know, him talking about CM Punk, it's, I'm sure him much more than Triple H and Stephanie really wanted things to work out. You know, he really wanted him to stay. So if CM Punk's podcast made it seem like there was no chance of him coming back, Vince, you know, the Steve Austin show with Vince gave us a little bit of hope that maybe someday things can be worked out.
I mean, you always have to think something's possible, right? But to go back to your point, Juan, in the entertainment business, there's a saying, like, most people are introverts that are trained outroverts. Like, the most successful people are people that are very closed in, and then when they need to be, they just go out there and kill it. So it doesn't surprise me that CM Punk is one of those people. Stone Cold even admitted it was the exact same way. They said on the podcast that if Jim Ross never did what he did, Stone Cold probably wouldn't have come back when he did. So
exactly, because he brought up that JR effectively gathered Vince McMahon and Stone Cold after he walked out with the whole Brock Lesnar situation. He didn't want to put him over. And even Vince McMahon apologized about the fact that CM Punk got his papers on his wedding day. Now, obviously, I think we got to make a note. Vince McMahon is the owner of the WWE. Can we really expect at any point in this podcast he's going to be talking direct trash about anybody, anywhere, when you got a publicly traded company? You probably got way more eyes in this podcast than people thought, because once again, this is the owner of a company being interviewed as the owner, not as Mr. McMahon, the chairman, the character. This is Vince McMahon, the owner, the guy behind the scenes and all that stuff. So Vince brought up one thing that we have talked about in the podcast. We could talk about this for hours, which is him being in tune with today's audience. Obviously, the internet erupted when he brought up the fact that he believes he's still in tune with the product, that at his age, he can still listen to the people. He listens to the WWE Universe. I don't know. I didn't really agree with that situation based on what we've seen, with the exception of D-Bry and some stuff. Taking it to you first, Keith, what did you think about that comment?
Don't take it to me yet. I need to look something up.
What do you think, Ryan?
I don't care. All right. I think, I honestly think he's a little delusional in that aspect. And maybe that's a strong word, but whatever. You know what I mean? You just bring up the whole D-Bry section. Like, they were forced. Like, they were just absolutely, beaten down into putting, Daniel Bryan into that main event. It's like you could tell they didn't want to do it, but it is 100% what the audience wanted. Never in recent years has it been so clear for the audience to want something and basically complain at every show until they got it. And it took more than the audience for that to happen. And if it was just Vince listening to the audience, it wouldn't have happened. So that's why I really think he doesn't listen as much as he'd like to think he was. It took external events to happen, or internal events to happen, for that thing to actually happen, which the crowd really wanted.
There's a thing, you can Google it. It's on Wikipedia. It's called founder syndrome, and that's basically what it sounded like. Vince says he's in touch with all these things, and he has all these people around him basically just to justify whatever Vince is thinking. But yeah, go look that up on Wikipedia, founder syndrome. It sums Vince McMahon up to a T.
Yeah, Reddit user brought that up, and reading it was scary, because one theme that I found throughout this whole interview is very much justifying almost everything that was happening, because Stone Cold brought up Cesaro, today's locker room, and then Vince McMahon had a very interesting answer. He had every answer about everything except blaming the WWE, except taking accountability for the company that he's the owner of. It's either writers, wrestlers have social media, so that's their outlet for all that stuff. And it seemed weird, because how many times have we been, Big E, let's take him for an example, social media, hilarious, all that good stuff. But it took until now, and even then, it's still not all of that we got through social media. So if anything, it just gives us inconsistency.
I think the way homer in that whole thing was when Vince McMahon started talking about his brass rings, and how the last person to grab one of those brass rings was John Cena. I went back today and listened to CM Punk's pipe bomb from back in the day, where he's like, "Oh, I've tried to grab so many of Vince McMahon's brass rings," and how he was saying that nobody's done it. Like that feels like such BS, because think about all the people in the last couple of years that have come up and then you just got shot down. Like he mentioned Cesaro, how he doesn't have character. You never really give him a chance to have character. He was a face.
He yodeled.
He had something going. Like even after all the yodeling BS, he was a face. He had something good. Now, like Steve Austin said, you throw him with Paul Heyman. Now he's a heel by association. Oh, now he's leaving Paul Heyman. Now he's kind of in the middle. And it just feels so lost and confused. How can you blame that on a guy like Cesaro when he has to go to work and do whatever you tell him because you in that interview said, well, then don't piss anybody off and you'll be fine?
I have a little bit of a different opinion on that. And aside from CM Punk and maybe, Zack Ryder on kind of like a lesser degree, that I think those guys did really, grab something and were successful. I think Punk could have been a lot more had certain things gone a little bit better, if he was booked a little bit better. And obviously Zack Ryder was just straight cut off. Maybe he wouldn't have become a main eventer, but he certainly would be higher on the card today if they didn't completely ruin him. At the same time, though, as great as Cesaro is, and as much times as the crowd's kind of been on his side, I do agree with Vince in the way that he really hasn't found that complete connection yet. I don't think it's quite there yet. And I think a lot of what Vince said is because there really hasn't been a guy to take over for John Cena. Maybe he's kind of blowing a little smoke just to motivate everyone in the locker room. He knows everyone's going to listen to this. Maybe he's just trying to say, listen, like, I'm not satisfied with you guys. Someone needs to step up. And maybe he's just kind of, he's burying them a little bit to motivate them more.
To go back to the Cesaro point, though, Cesaro had something that connected. Like, maybe it wasn't cutting these great promos, but think about the swing earlier this year, how that became a thing. And then they basically taken it away from him at this point.
I don't think the swing alone is going to get him, main event status. Yes, it was a nice little attraction, a nice little fun spot, but I really don't think he truly made that, like, widespread connection that, someone like Daniel Bryan was finally starting to get, and then became huge.
But even that example, if we go back to the whole CM Punk interview and all these things, that wasn't even the original case. And with the Cesaro example, Zack Ryder, Bo Dallas, guys that at first they had a rocky start, but at one point they had something. We didn't know what, because before we could even define it, before we could even put a name on it, WWE stopped it. Bo Dallas, you could tell they were trying to do the whole heel thing. Then they were like, okay, people are popping for him, so let's keep that going. Then he lost, and he's gone. Zack Ryder got himself over amazingly, and then boom, like 2 months later, and then he never recovered from that. Cesaro started to do the Cesaro swing thing. Was that enough? No, I don't think it was enough at all. But we'll never know.
But it was a starting point.
They turned him heel. Yeah. So it's a very frustrating situation to me as a fan, because I'm sitting there going like, you're saying you listen to us, but the internet is not 5 cats anymore. I mean, for example, around 1,000 people listen to this podcast. That's around 1,000 people that more or less, I would assume, agree with our opinion because they listen to each week. So that's 1,000 people that could effectively buy the network, could buy your merchandise. How can you tell us that you're listening when clearly you see a lot of people online sort of complain about that stuff?
Not only that, but the best part of that interview from a personal standpoint is when Stone Cold mentioned Vince McMahon's Twitter and just the vile disgust that was on his face. Like, obviously you're not checking or listening there. So where exactly are you listening?
No, it's a good point. And I mean, I can understand them not listening to the internet. All right. The internet wrestling community does make up a small portion of the actual audience, but Zack Ryder appealed, to he was getting big chants at like every show. That was a mainstream appeal. And that right there, as like Kurt Hawkins said in an interview, that rubbed a lot of people in the locker room the wrong way, that even if you are doing things on your own and you're doing something revolutionary, you're getting over without anyone's help, if they want to cut you off and end it, they will, and they can.
But I think the biggest situation there, even with the Zack Ryder situation, he became big because of a thing he did on the internet. Even Vince himself pointed out, hey, television ratings are going down. It's not that people aren't watching, but you got the internet. So it's a very interesting situation that was bittersweet to me. The last thing I want to bring up is competition. So Vince McMahon was asked by Stone Cold, you killed the territories, you bought out WCW, which, he mentioned that he didn't really kill the territories killed the territories. He went with the whole
He even mentioned Brett
thing.
screwed Brett.
Yeah. And it was interesting because, just to summarize, he brought up the fact that they had money, but they weren't willing to spend it in the companies. And when they saw Vince getting all hungry, they just sort of took their bags and left. What I do want to bring up is the whole thing that we've actually brought up. Ryan specifically mentioned it multiple times. WWE doesn't compete with another wrestling company. WWE competes with TV, period. And that's what he consistently brought up. And I wanted to get your reaction, Ryan. Hearing the owner, does that change your perspective on the audience that the WWE is trying to get?
No, I think it was more just a confirmation of a lot of discussions we've had. How about how the show, sometimes Raw seems weird because they're trying to appeal to so many people. I mean, he brings up the wide variety of demographics that watch Raw and how little segments appeal to different people. I think it was just a lot of confirmation of a lot of our assumptions that we've had. So there wasn't too much of a surprise, and I think he's completely right, where it's watch something else on Monday nights. Am I going to play a video game or something? You have to just create interest to get people to sit down and watch your program. But yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need another wrestling company to have that competition.
That's a really good point, and this changes everything. Not just Vince McMahon's interview, not just CM Punk's, but we got the CM Punk Q&A. Obviously, a lot of wrestlers are talking. Jericho, everybody is talking about this because we've heard it from dirt sheets. Now we are hearing things from the owner of the WWE and the most controversial superstar in the WWE in the past decade, arguably because he's exposed so many things that we aren't accustomed to hearing.
I just want to bring up a few things before we end the whole Vince thing, and maybe just to get your guys' overall impressions on it.
Sure.
But just a few little tidbits. It was really cool to hear Macho Man is going to be in the Hall of Fame at some point. We got some confirmation there. Austin didn't grill him on the whole Stephanie McMahon thing, but
that look said everything it needed to say.
Yeah, that look was like, you want to make reference to something that you can't.
We'll never know. I'm pretty sure that's one thing we may never know. But overall, I thought it was obviously awesome. The first time we get the real Vince McMahon, I think, almost ever. My only gripe, I feel like, was Austin kind of took over at some points and was just kind of rambling on too much. And it's like, I love you, Austin. We have your podcast twice a week.
Yeah, we're not there for you, Austin.
I needed way more of Vince talking at certain points, and we didn't really need to go into the Attitude Era stuff. Monday Night Wars is covering that pretty well. I feel like there's a billion other questions that could have been asked, and I think a chunk of that hour was kind of wasted. But nevertheless, beggars can't be choosers. We still got a damn good amount of content.
And here's hoping that they actually do this again. I guarantee the numbers on that was through the roof. Who knows? Vince McMahon Part 2, Stephanie McMahon, Triple H. The options are endless. They want to get subscribers to the network. This gets me tuned in because I watched the rerun at 3 a.m. in the morning, okay? Like the actual stream. I didn't go online and get another source. I watched it there, which means, yes, it gets me tuning in. So thanks to each and every person that's contributed to all your awesome comments in this week's episode. Stay tuned after the closing of this podcast, where I'm going to bring up the YouTube comments regarding spoilers in professional wrestling. This is a very lengthy conversation, obviously, so we want to thank you for listening. We want to thank you for an unforgettable week, really, because it's not just about what we think. It's not just about the YouTube comments, but seeing the community almost implode. Almost every single thread on Squared Circle, Twitter, anything. People are just like, they pulled the curtain, and there's another curtain that apparently we didn't even know was there, and we are now exposed to it.
Exactly. And real talk for a minute here. This whole podcast has been about how big of a week it is in wrestling podcasts. And you out there in listener land are taking the time to listen to us for an hour. And that's crazy. And thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Seriously, the reason we do this is it's awesome to talk about wrestling. It's more awesome to really grow our family. Hear people that, you got similar opinions. It's wrestling. It's fun. And that's why keep it safe. Whatever happens, my final point, I want to actually get your final thoughts on the combination of everything we've talked about. Mine is keep it safe so we can do this for a lot longer with the people that we love to watch.
Was that English?
It's too many sexual references that I was trying to do there, but you get my point. Basically, keep these people alive. Give them a season off. Give them a couple of weeks off. Do something with them, but keep them alive so I can keep watching them each and every week. What do you think, Keith?
Agreed. And maybe if there's a time to maybe check ourselves as a community and take a second to think, what are we actually asking of these people that we watch week in and week out, and maybe rethink that a little bit.
My final thoughts is I feel like we should have followed suit and revealed some of our kayfabe or something and gone beyond the fourth wall of the Byte That podcast. But in all seriousness, I think this was just a very eye-opening week. We just got, we've gone years without hearing this kind of stuff, and then in 1 week, it's just like
boom,
sensory overload. So it's just super exciting, and I think we're gonna look back at this year and this week as a very exciting time in wrestling. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the podcast. So once again, we want to thank you guys for all your participation, whether it's on social media or, just listening to the show. We always appreciate it. So as always, check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ByteThatCast. Juan's got the Freight Train review coming up this Thursday. He's going to be doing a review of Lucha Underground next week. I'm going to get some videos up this week concerning end of the year stuff. And remember, episode 69 in just 2 weeks. It's Byte That in Puerto Rico. So stay tuned for that.
2/3 of Byte That in Puerto Rico.
Once again, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.
So as promised, here are our responses regarding my video, Spoilers in Wrestling. First, Simon Linder said, to be honest, it might be another reason to tune in and see if it's happening or not. Also, just imagine a real Sting fan looking at these spoilers. There will be no doubt in my mind about watching the pay-per-view. It really just depends on the situation to the people who look at them and the spoiler itself. And Photoshop, we got Photoshop, the actual next week, I'm hoping premiere. He said, sadly, spoilers kill the shock factor when watching wrestling. When I read the spoilers from the Hell in a Cell, I felt like it was a waste of time of watching the show. For SummerSlam, I didn't know if Randy or Sting were going to make a surprise appearance, so it kept me guessing, and it made me happy to see the outcome at the end of the day. I think it's better to discuss what has happened already rather than what is guaranteed to happen tomorrow. It keeps the interest going until the next episode airs. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Photoshop. And to summarize my thoughts about your comments, yeah, I think spoilers have a place in wrestling and pretty much anything except maybe a TV show where somebody may die and it's like, wow, then why even watch? But in this case, a Sting fan that maybe doesn't tune into the product anymore may see this and go, hey, I gotta watch it. It's Sting. Who knows? Maybe it's the only time we get to see him. So thank you for your contributions, for checking out the YouTube channel, and we'll see you, everybody, next week right here in the Byte